When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ledlow, and enjoy today's episode. For the audience, if you're just tuning in, we just hit the 30-minute mark. I have Matt and Bruno. They are co-partners with a company called Koi, which they just created recently and launched. And they will be doing behavioral threat management and case studies and servicing these lines of service to many clients across all industries, healthcare, education, and I'm sure financials and their investments. Whoever would like to have them, if you're listening to this and let's say you're a chief security officer of an organization, feel free to reach out to either Bruno or Matt and say, hey, I'd love to set up a call. Or if you're a chief of staff, family office, and you need help, and maybe you have a case study, or maybe you need to do something on social media or something. These gentlemen both have doctorates in their field, the case study. They're considered subject matter experts. If I had a doctorate, I guess I'd be a subject matter expert too. But they're also very human men that want to serve others. Not really about the PhDs. You didn't hear the first episode, but it's more about serving others and make the world a better place. And they know that they have certain gifts that they're given to offer the world, to make the world a safer place. And I just need to do that recap, because what happens, audiences, usually listeners listen to the first 30 minutes and they jump in the next 30 minutes and go, who are these people? So can you let us know when you're 30 minutes up so I can know what part of the episode I'm listening to this? So usually when I hit that 30-minute episode, I give a little brief introduction of who the guests are on the podcast, so that I just want to give that clarity in the podcasting world, because sometimes people are calling me and say, hey man, can you just do the intro on the next 30 minutes so we know what we're listening to? I'm like, okay, I'd be happy to do that. So that's why I just did that. So we got Matt and Bruno on the podcast right now, and we're discussing their backgrounds in law enforcement. They both have a law enforcement corrections background, and Bruno did some stuff in the school system. He was actually involved in a school shooting, and that had to be horrific. And so I'll let Bruno share about that. And Matt, in the early episode, was discussing, breaking down what Koi is and what they can offer the industry. And so we'll retouch on that. But for the audience, Bruno, I would love to hear that story, what it was like when you're hearing firecrackers go off in the school setting, and what was going through your brain and how you responded to that chaos.
Yeah, so thank you. It's a very difficult situation. I mentioned at the beginning that I worked as a gang and homicide detective. My career was in California, so I've been exposed to violence, and nothing prepares you to see blood in a school hallway, or bullet holes, or shell casings. It's a very foreign thing to see. It's supposed to be an environment that's not nurturing and welcome, and to see something like that, it's really shocking to the mind. I was very fortunate because I worked for a great school district with great leadership and great resources. We had a terrific police department. We had great relationships with local first responders. So from a response perspective, things went well. We did a great job with the reunification, which is it's when you're trying to get students back with their parents, and you have to account for your staff and your students. And because we did a good job with that, as a director of safety and security following the shooting, I often say that my credibility goes to zero, right? I was hired to promote a safe environment. The day that, the worst day possible happened, 3 people were shot, and it happened under my watch. Luckily, no one died.
Wow. Congratulations.
But your credibility as a professional goes to zero. But if you do a good job with the recovery, and you prepare for that, and it wasn't just me; it was a bunch of people working together, and it wasn't perfect, but we had a plan, and we executed on the plan, and we're able to reunify students with their parents rather quickly, and we achieved full accountability before the end of the day in a matter of hours. So that's an unusual thing for a campus with a student population of over 1,800 students.
Wow, that's massive. What was that day like, Bruno?
Yeah,
Can you
sorry.
explain that? Were you there in the campus when the shots were fired? Were you actually there? Or?
No. I worked out of a police office and technology office that was away from the site. I responded to the site, but I wasn't there when it happened.
So you responded. So it was major chaos, probably. Just
yes, it was a massive event. It was a televised school shooting. It was the first school shooting of the 2021 school year. You had the governor, you had the White House watching. So, and mutual aid responses you would expect from not just local agencies, but, state and federal agencies as well. So everyone came together, including the community. I'm not going to, maybe if we have time later, I can get into the recovery a little bit more and how we dealt with the crisis. But what I can say is that what we learned from that incident is that we were a resource-rich district. And what I mean by that is we had a lot of physical security capabilities. We had our own police department, our own 911 center. And again, we had a lot of great partners and great premier law enforcement agencies around our campuses. But what we needed, the area of opportunity was prevention, and not just prevention, but creating that collaborative culture, right? This was an incident that involved high-risk activity between two students who were involved with drug trafficking, and there was one of them had robbed the other one of drugs, and they had a shooting that took place outside of the school environment prior to the school shooting, and then when these two individuals came before one another through a planned event, a shooting happened in school. So this was a kind of outside problems morphing into the educational setting. But the troubling thing, what we found out after the fact, is that there were several other students who were aware of the dispute, who were aware that something was coming, right? And that information wasn't communicated. So when I mentioned earlier that you got to promote that collaborative safety and security environment, it comes from that. It comes from me seeing that there was a huge opportunity where, whether it's a school, campus, or a workforce, we have to get our personnel involved with understanding that reporting concerning behaviors early on can be life-saving. It can also be beneficial to the person who is displaying concerning behaviors, right? It doesn't necessarily need to amount to employment separation or expulsion. If you have a threat assessment team or workplace violence prevention team in place, you may be able to bring a successful resolution for all. But early intervention is key, and without that reporting, we can't intervene. So that was that's why I'm so passionate about prevention, and that's why I try to incorporate prevention into pretty much every other component of safety and security, because I see the value that it adds. It helps you create an ecosystem, right, where you bring all these different initiatives together, and if you distribute them well, you have a robust safety and security program. And with these mandates coming through, as I mentioned earlier, especially in the K-12 sector, what I'm seeing, and this is a big risk, I'm seeing busy educators and school professionals that are trying to meet compliance, not necessarily do the work with the highest level of fidelity. And I think that's an area where COI can help, and other safety and security professionals who are have expertise in the space can perhaps help schools not only be compliant, but you make sure that they're doing the work with the highest level of fidelity.
Wow. That was a great explanation. I could have said it better myself. I'm thinking as we're going, we have a new presidential administration in office now, and there's a lot of stuff going on in DC, a lot of cuts, a lot of people are going to be losing their jobs here, it looks like, from what I'm seeing on the news. And in your gentlemen's thought process of forecasting, I know you guys are in the behavior threat assessment game, but people are listening to this are probably wondering, what do you guys see happening in the next 4 years under a new administration as far as, behavioral responses to, life changes, losing jobs, and just stimulation of positive and negative? I mean, do you guys have a theory on what you see happening in the next 4 years, U.S. based in, corporate work environment, workplace violence? Do you think we'll see an uptick in that and a lot of political opposition?
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw in a couple of thoughts. I mean, I can't really forecast and predict, 4 years. And I honestly think that this has nothing, what I'm about to say is really non-political at all. I think forget the new administration, bring in any administration. What we're looking at is real world lived experiences of human people, and the challenges that some of the things that they're facing and what we're seeing. And we don't know how this will all shape out. Could it be great? We don't know. I'm not politically savvy enough to be able to speak to the genius or otherwise that's behind certain decisions. But what I will say is, we are seeing a lot of people who are losing their employment. We're seeing a lot of people who haven't, but are worried that they could. And with this comes a lot of significant changes and hardships, whether it's not just financial. We see that, oh, you lost your job, you don't get an income anymore. That's the obvious. But, for folks like Bruno and I, who are super passionate about what we do, there's a big part of our identity that is attached to the nature of the work. So you're not just seeing people who lose that income. You will see, the risks of who am I and where do I belong? I think our greatest risk is probably going to see an uptick in emotional unwellness in this country for people who are trying to navigate the anxiety that comes with uncertainty. We saw that during COVID, spikes of that because we didn't know what would be. And I think that's always the case. None of us have a really great pulse on a lot of the rationale or logic or otherwise of decisions that are made. But ultimately, we deal with the repercussions of other people's decisions and how we cope with that. So I think for businesses and the best that we possibly can, we just need to be considerate of and sensitive to the impact that these changes and transitions have on other people. And there are too many to really tackle all the different ways that it could. But just to remember that the loss of a job is not just loss of employment. It is a loss of many, many other things, how that affects your family, even just the ability to say, hey, I had that income to be able to go on a vacation, which was a huge thing for my family. It was a big part of what kept us together, had those moments. All these little pieces that we don't necessarily think about in terms of the bigger macro level. I'm talking that's more on the micro individual level, personal, but on the macro level, I think we always see concerns during times of significant transition. And if there's economic hardship, I think we could expect to see some upticks in some deviant behavior, whatever that might look like. But in desperate moments when people don't really know what the answer, the outcome is going to be, sometimes what they will resort to is, I need to have a greater sense of control over that which I don't have control over, and I'll find it wherever I can. For some people, that may mean taking up a hobby. Some people, that may mean working harder to navigate through. And for other people, it may be, I'm going to prove a point, whatever that might mean. Whether it's, I'll take my own life, I'll take someone else's life, become this sort of vigilante martyr in a sense. I think you could see hundreds, if not thousands, of different possible scenarios that play out. But I would just, advise, people just to be compassionate and considerate about, whatever changes. And you know what? We've seen the resilience of this country, I think, during times of hardship. We saw it in LA recently with the fires and communities coming together. We saw it in numbers after 9/11. We saw it as being from Boston after the marathon bombing. And remember that game at the Red Sox played and Big Papi came out and said what he said, if people remember. And then that first Boston Bruins game where everyone in that audience sang the national anthem for Rene Rancourt so he didn't have to. I would love to see the greater humanity that we all have the potential for come together during this time, as opposed to seeing more of what we've been seeing. And that's, well, how do our differences pull us apart and how can we become more polarized? I don't think there's time for that right now.
Wow. Well said, Matt. Your thoughts, Bruno?
Yeah, so no comments regarding anything that's political in nature, but I do think that the threat landscape is not only elevated, but it will continue to be elevated for a variety of factors, right? I think personally, technology plays a big role in all of it, and the reason why I say that is we haven't leveraged technology to its full potential as a force for good. We often find out that someone was researching online, they maybe learned tactics or had ideas or started to identify with a past attacker because of online research. At the core center of this, right? Like I can do research for my doctoral studies or my master studies, and it won't have any impact on me. I'm a resilient individual. I have a family, I have a job, I have a profession, I have outlook. Now, if I'm a brittle person where maybe I feel victimized by society, Matt often speaks about having unmet needs, and I'm struggling, and I start to think, well, you know what? I really don't fit in here. I'm in pain, and I want others to experience my pain, and they get into that pathway behavior. Technology can be an accelerant. It can really help things. It can help validate feelings. It can help stimulate ideas. It can help make ideas operational. And I think and I won't mention any companies, but we're all aware that a CEO was recently killed. And the reason why I think the threat landscape is going to continue to evolve is the general reaction, even from the media and prominent figures, public figures, right, in saying, well, you can only push people so far, and you kind of see this justification of violence almost as there's utility in it. And that kind of utility and the way it's being framed, I think it's very concerning. This is an individual who's currently in custody facing a very serious charge. There's multiple social media accounts supporting the individual, the money donations for the legal fund. And if we get into a situation where we leverage violence as a way to correct wrongs, right? It's a big slippery slope, and it's just going to be a matter of time before we're personally impacted by that. So having the norms, the societal rules and regulations, court procedures, those are the things that we should be following as a society rather than violence. And I'm concerned about the imbalance of technology as a force that can facilitate evil things. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you I remember recently searching for this CEO killing, and I saw this story from a news outlet that played a video, right? That says, hey, here's a video of this particular CEO being executed by this individual. There was no caution, no warning, just a play here and you see the video. The same news outlet did a story on a OpenAI executive who committed suicide, and there was a caution statement, right? Hey, this story is going to discuss self-harm. If you're experiencing, thoughts of self-harm, contact 988. So at least you have a way and a conduit to point someone who may be struggling, right, to a source of help. Where if maybe I'm someone who is feeling aggrieved and maybe I'm contemplating violence, there's no speed bumps, right? There's no conduit to forward me to a place where I may be able to speak with someone and try to problem solve in an effective way. So for those reasons, I think the threat landscape is elevated, and it's going to continue to become more elevated if we further justify violence as a normal thing to do, or even acceptable thing to do.
Yeah, Bruno, when you say technology, I'm guessing you're speaking of social media. Is that a good assumption?
Yes, social media. But even like I said, I've seen prominent figures saying, making comments like you can only push a person so far, or I understand this happened, but the healthcare industry is very unfair. Like framing it that way, it's very concerning to me.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up because I had an episode with Brittany. She is actually under 30. Works in Dallas, Texas, hairstylist. And I was just sitting in her chair, and she'd said a lot of executives where she lives comes to get their haircut, and they're all freaked out when that all went down. She goes, I'm talking to my team about having protection. Goes, am I going to put on this hit list? And she told me what's happening on social media was that she's seeing it's a revolution of that generation coming out, and they're basically targeting these CEOs that are making all the money off these hardworking people. And she said the revolution is being created, and they're all over TikTok. And there's this guy that Luigi that did the shooting. He's like a modern day Avenger is how they look at him. I was like, whoa. And now is that society? Is that where we're at now in social media? A revolution that really looks to this individual as being a modern day superhero, or like an Avenger, like what she said on the podcast. I'm like, wow. And I think there's technology and social media has really changed their microphone of getting their voice heard.
Yes, I agree. And go ahead, Matt.
Oh, I was just going to make a comment. Once upon a time, if I wanted to find out some information about a particular topic or subject, I'd have to go to, I think, had the World Book Encyclopedia, 26 volumes, I think, maybe a few more, because I think S and T had more topics than Z and X. You'd have to flip through those gold leafed edged pages. I'm dating myself here, to learn about whatever it was, and you had to put in the effort to find that knowledge. You had to go to the store to buy the latest magazine or subscribe to it. And do you remember subscribing to anything and waiting from month to month with excitement and fervor?
Oh, yeah.
I remember for me, it was music, and it was Metal Edge magazine, and I couldn't wait for it to come. But nowadays, I mean, my daughter, who's 7, who knows how to work a computer because she uses one for school, which I didn't have when I first started in school at age of 7, she can go on and type in 2 letters.
Wow.
And you don't know what that topic is going to be because of the innocence. And therefore, she's immediately exposed to, she's not of a developmental capacity to really process and understand what the content is that she's seeing, or whatever the flavor of the week, idea, theme, hashtag is right there in your face. So instead, where we used to have to search for knowledge and ideas, philosophies, and theories, they're being thrust upon us. And you know what? It goes back to this idea of what I think frames the work that we do. People just want to be connected and a part of something. And for that vulnerable, fragile, impressionable person who's like, where do I fit in? I just want to belong somewhere. You know what? Let me just attach myself to this particular thing. A lot of people seem to be there. I'll have a network. I'll have a community. I'll have friends. And I think there are a lot of people out there espousing ideas in the name of some sort of belief system, theory, ideology, whatever it is, that don't truly understand the totality of what they're saying. But everything is so accessible. And I'm a little biased about what I'm going to say.
Okay.
But Bruno's work, his doctoral work and the research that he's published and what he's done to translate into this really captivating presentation as one of the trainings that we offer as part of our speaking engagements and keynotes. I know I'm biased, and this is not a sales pitch of any kind. Totally objective. One of my favorite presentations, one of the most profound and impacting. I think I wish more people could just be exposed to it, but he nails this. I mean, he has discovered, some patterns and trends dating back to the not so distant past, to really kind of look at how did we get here and what's happening to our youth in particular, and the impact of social media and technology. So it's really quite remarkable. I don't want to give away too much because I want people to come out and find him where he's presenting or where we're speaking, or to ask for it, because I think it is so much value, that I think that message really needs to get out there. And I admit my bias if it's there, but
you look forward to getting more about that, Bruno. Hearing more about that. To the audience, you'd have to show up and attend one of their presentations, I guess, to find more about that intel. But yeah, when I was sitting in their chair and she explained to me the ideology of that generation and how they really feel about these CEOs making the money, and they don't really feel sorry for them. I'm like, whoa. My brain just went in hyper analytical mode going, what the heck has just happened with technology? What have we created? And I'm like, and then we had Chris Coleman on with Fred 5, and he kind of gave, his theory and opinion on it from a security standpoint. And I'm like, yeah, we have social media now feeding us with that ideology of how they feel and believe. And like you said, everybody wants to be part of a tribe, be part of something, Matt, and it makes more sense. Everybody wants to be Insta famous or viral famous on social media. That's just the generation and how they feel and think. You can't take that feeling away from them.
Yes, if I'm feeling alone, if I'm angry, if I'm searching for a cause and an identity, and even if I don't start my research for let's say targeted violence, I'm just talking about the way I feel and how disconnected I am with society. It doesn't take very long before one of your hits, right, one of your returns becomes someone who committed an act of targeted violence, and then you can maybe start to identify with that person and maybe what was senseless. At one point, Matt often says this, right? We often call these events senseless. Well, they're senseless to us. We have family, we have love in our lives, we have things to look for. But to a person who is in that situation, and I'm not justifying what they do, I'm just saying there's a thought process behind what they're doing. They're making sense out of that, right? There's purpose in that. And I think that adults, and this is why I said technology. We need to use technology as a force for good. And don't get me wrong, technology provides many protective factors. I'm just saying it's becoming increasingly more difficult for parents to monitor that, and for schools to monitor that. Kids were when I was in the K-12 sector, we had safeguards to keep kids from using school issued devices for inappropriate things. Well, they're bypassing that all the time. They're using VPNs. They're very sophisticated with the use of technology. And even parents who try to be proactive in terms of maybe setting some systems with their phone, these kids are learning how to do workarounds, right, and still gain access. And what I saw that troubled me was seeing, like, especially middle-aged school students, which is a critical age for brain development. These kids are up all night. I'm seeing what they're doing with their school-issued devices, and I'm getting hits on inappropriate searches, and it's at 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning. So their inability to regulate and turn it off from a physiological perspective and brain development, that's very troubling in itself.
So they're getting a massive dopamine hit all through the night.
Yeah.
Overload.
Correct. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that just blows me away, and just how it changed our environment, our culture, how the kids learn, how do they interact, self-esteem issues, depression, anxiety, and just builds and builds and builds. And then all of a sudden, they're 18 years old. What do they do with all this?
Yes, and we got to talk about K through 12, because today's K through 12 student is tomorrow's either higher education student, is the person who's joining the military or coming into the workforce, right? And that's why Matt and I, with COI, we're trying to. We have different levels of training from foundational, just so that we give people the awareness. But again, we don't just stop at that. We can help you develop plans. We know what to look for from that fidelity lens, right?
Lost a connection.
I think we lost your audio, Bruno.
It happens.
It's showing muted.
I don't know.
There you go.
A while back. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know what happened.
Nope.
Technology, wonderful when it works.
Mark, stop censoring me. No, I'm kidding.
If you hit the space bar, maybe.
Maybe that's what happened. No, I was just saying, we getting schools to just schools or the workplace or higher education institutions. It's not just about meeting compliance. You have to do this work with fidelity. And you can't stop everything, right? Threat assessment is not about risk elimination. It's about risk reduction. But the level of effort that you put into it will, propel your ability to do the work and intervene and do it right, so that you're mitigating concerns early on and effectively.
I think you have to cast your net wide too, and I think that's a little narrow sometimes in terms of the scope of what you're looking at. And often, I hear from folks in this industry who are like, "Well, we're good. We have an active threat response, active protocol, run, hide, fight-ish type thing, whatever variation or version they have, and that's great. You want to equip people with the skills to know what to do should something happen, because that's the nature of human behavior. But when you have that in isolation, you're sending a message that, hey, this could happen, or it's going to happen, and this is what you do. There's no message being sent like, there are things that we can do to prevent you from never having to worry about that, just being mindful of it. But maybe if we're taking a more of a prevention stance, we can prevent that thing from happening. So I think it's not one or the other, just like we don't say, oh, it's just behavioral threat assessment by itself. No, it works in partnership, in tandem with physical security efforts and so forth. And in terms of the scope as well, a lot of folks think, I'm here and think that what we're here to do is to prevent the next mass shooting, which is probably the thing we are least likely going to have access to preventing, because it's often what we've seen, it could be someone who has no known affiliation to a particular setting. that we could not internally have seen that coming. Other people out there could have recognized the warning signs. So we need much more of a public health approach to this. But the things that we're here to support and help with to round out the robustness and to bring people up to compliance with best practices in threat assessment and workplace violence prevention is we need to be conscientious about how we respond to concerns about self-harm in schools and in workplaces, intimate partner, domestic and dating violence. We forget about dating violence a lot, especially with our younger folks, thinking, well, we don't have to worry about intimate partner, domestic violence. They're not married. Well, there's more to it. It's a broader scope, and self-harm isn't just suicide. There's a whole spectrum, but stalking and radicalization, there are different typologies of behaviors that can pose risks or threats or potential harm to any setting. And I mean, we talk about schools as if they're a different entity, but a school is a workplace. People work there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And right. And in addition to that scope is, and we're writing about it now, a lot of people think, well, I'm in a school threat assessment capacity. I need to be concerned about our students and who of our students could come back. But you're forgetting not just current students or former students, you're forgetting about the employees, the staff, the educators, the vendors, the contractors, and the parents. Like I said, I'm from Boston. You ever see an angry hockey dad from Boston, Massachusetts? Like that's someone you got to watch out for. But, in all seriousness, we have to think a little bit more comprehensively. But I think a really important message, which will help really, really benefit the culture of your workplace or your school or your organization. And the research shows this too, just by simply letting people know that you have a violence prevention model, not just a violence response model, immediately improves employee and customer sense of wellness and sense of security. Not a false sense of security, but they at least know that people are trying to get ahead of the curve. And then they are going to hopefully, and we've seen it, want to become a part of that community effort to prevent this.
Wow.